Thelnas stood at the landing platform and watched the human transport ship descend through the orange sky of Coven Prime. The ship was ugly compared to the sleek vessels of the Galactic Union. It had burns and dents across its hull like it had seen too many battles already. Thelnas adjusted all four of its crystalline arms nervously. The Council had assigned it to observe these humans, to write reports about their effectiveness in combat. Thelnas had studied the limited data available about humanity. They came from a planet called Earth, a world with excessive gravity and dangerous predators. The humans had stayed isolated for 3 centuries after discovering faster-than-light travel. Nobody knew why. Now they were here, selling their services as mercenaries. The transport ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Thelnas expected to see massive warriors, perhaps covered in natural armor or wielding fearsome claws. Instead, the first human to emerge was surprisingly small. She wore simple combat fatigues and carried no visible weapons. Her skin was pale brown, her black hair tied back in a practical style. She walked down the ramp with confident steps and stopped in front of Thelnas. "Observer Thelnas?" the human asked. Her voice was calm and clear. "Yes, you are the commander?" Thelnas asked, trying to hide its disappointment. "Captain Jiwan, Terran Expeditionary Contract Company. Welcome to our operation." She extended one hand in the human greeting gesture. Thelnas touched it briefly with one crystalline finger. The human's skin was warm and soft. No scales, no protective coating, nothing. How did such fragile creatures survive? More humans emerged from the transport. Thelnas counted 40 soldiers in total. They moved with purpose, unloading equipment and establishing a perimeter. Each human looked slightly different, varying in size and coloring, but all shared the same basic structure. 2 arms, 2 legs, forward-facing eyes, and that soft, vulnerable skin. The smallest human barely reached Thelnas's shoulder. The largest was perhaps half again as tall, but still unremarkable compared to the 4-meter warriors of the Krenth species or the armored bulk of the Dovak. "You seem disappointed," Captain Jiwan said, watching Thelnas's reaction. "I apologize. I meant no disrespect," Thelnas said quickly. Jiwan smiled, showing flat white teeth. "Everyone has that reaction first time they see us. Come, I'll show you our setup and brief you on tomorrow's operation." The human base camp was organized with military precision. Defensive positions covered all approaches. Supply crates were stacked and labeled in multiple languages. Thelnas noticed that humans apparently needed large quantities of water and something they called coffee. The command tent held sophisticated equipment. Some of it clearly human-made, some adapted from Union technology. Captain Jiwan pulled up a holographic display of the battlefield. The Vryn swarm holds this valley complex. Standard doctrine suggests they have approximately 10,000 warriors in the immediate area, with reinforcements available within 6 hours. Our contract specifies that we break their position and secure the high ground here. She pointed to a ridge overlooking the valley. 10,000? Thelnas felt its crystals dim with concern. "You have 40 soldiers." 42, including support staff, Jiwan corrected. "And yes, the odds are poor. That's why you hired humans. I did not personally hire." Figure of speech. "The Union hired us because everyone else said this mission was impossible." Jiwan's smile never wavered. "We specialize in impossible." Thelnas studied the tactical display. The Vryn were insect-like creatures with thick chitin armor and powerful mandibles. They fought in coordinated swarms and felt no individual fear since they operated on a hive mind principle. Standard Union forces needed a 3-to-1 numerical advantage to engage Vryn successfully. These humans planned to attack at a 20-to-1 times disadvantage asterisk. "Your strategy?" Thelnas asked. "Close assault at dawn. Fast penetration of their perimeter. Targeted strikes on command nodes. Sustained pressure until they break." Jiwan spoke, as if describing a simple training exercise. But the casualties will be acceptable. Jiwon's expression hardened slightly. Observer Thelnas, you're here to watch and report. We're here to fight. Those are different jobs. That evening, Thelnas moved through the human camp and observed the soldiers preparing for battle. What it saw disturbed it deeply. Humans engaged in intense physical training even the night before combat, pushing their bodies to exhaustion. They joked about death with casual humor that seemed psychologically abnormal. One human laughed while saying he hoped to die hilariously enough to become a funny story. His companions found this amusing, rather than horrifying. Thelnas approached a human sitting alone, methodically cleaning a large rifle. The soldier's name tag read, Daehyun. Why do you train so hard when you should be conserving energy? Thelnas asked. Daehyun looked up. His dark eyes were calm but intense. We're getting ready. Mind and body both. But you are already prepared. Never prepared enough. Daehyun ran a cloth along the rifle barrel. You know what we are? Observer? Persistence. Hunters. Back on Earth, our ancestors hunted animals faster and stronger than us. We chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't stop. Ever. That's in our blood still. You experience fear? Thelnas asked. Of course. Daehyun smiled slightly. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the fuel. Other species experience fear paralysis. It stops them from taking dangerous actions. Yeah. We're different that way. Daehyun set down his rifle and looked directly at Thelnas. Our fear makes us more dangerous. Not less. Tomorrow you'll see. We don't freeze. We don't flee. We go forward. Thelnas returned to its observation post deeply unsettled. It transmitted its first report to Union Command that night. The humans appeared physically unremarkable, perhaps even weak by galactic standards. Their equipment was functional but not exceptional. Their numbers were laughably small for the mission parameters. Yet something about them created a sense of unease that Thelnas could not fully explain. The way they moved. The way they spoke about combat. The complete absence of doubt in their voices. Captain Jiwon had said they specialized in impossible missions. Thelnas began to suspect that humans had a fundamentally different definition of impossible than the rest of the galaxy. As Thelnas tried to rest before the dawn assault, it heard the humans singing something they called a war song. The melody was harsh, and the words spoke of violence and victory. The sound carried across the camp like a promise, or perhaps a threat. Tomorrow would reveal what these soft-skinned creatures could actually do in battle. Dawn broke across Coven Prime with red and orange light that painted the valley in blood colors. Thelnas positioned itself at the designated observation point, wearing the armored suit that Union protocols required for combat zones. Its recording equipment was active, capturing everything for the official report. Below, the human forces assembled in loose formation. They moved quietly, checking weapons and equipment one final time. Captain Jiwon spoke briefly to her soldiers, too quietly for Thelnas to hear the words. Then the humans began moving toward the Vreen positions. The Union artillery opened fire first, standard doctrine for softening enemy positions. Explosions bloomed across the valley floor, where Vreen tunnels and bunkers sat partially hidden. The Vreen response came quickly. Thousands of the insect warriors poured from underground positions like water from a broken dam. Their chittering war cry echoed across the valley, a sound that triggered instinctive fear in most species. Thelnas felt its crystals vibrate with distress at the noise. The Union forces began their tactical withdrawal. This was proper military procedure when facing overwhelming numbers. Fall back to prepared positions. Establish defensive lines. Coordinate with artillery support. The commanders were following their training exactly, but the humans did not withdraw. They advanced. Thelnas watched in horror as the small human force moved directly toward the Vryn swarm. A human sergeant named Minho led the forward squad. He was medium height with broad shoulders and moved with the casual confidence of someone walking through a garden rather than into certain death. His squad followed in a wedge formation, weapons ready. The Vreen noticed the humans and redirected their assault. At least 300 insect warriors charged directly at Minho's squad of 8 humans. Thelnas activated emergency communication channels, ready to call for medical evacuation. The humans would be overrun in seconds. Then the humans opened fire. Thelnas had seen many species in combat. The Krenth fought with honor and strength. The Dovak used overwhelming firepower. The Silken employed sophisticated tactics. But humans fought with something different, something terrible. Each shot was precise, no wasted ammunition. Minho's squad moved as a single organism, each human covering specific angles and distances. When Vreen broke through the firing line, humans switched to close combat without hesitation. Thelnas saw Minho pull a large knife and drive it through a Vreen's head carapace with enough force to pierce the thick chitin. Another human used her rifle as a club, smashing it into a Vreen's legs before shooting it at point-blank range. They fought with brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no panic, no mercy. A Vreen warrior's claw tore across one human's arm, cutting deep enough that blue-red blood sprayed across the ground. The human screamed, but the scream was not pain or fear. It was rage. The wounded human killed 3 more Vreen in the next 10 seconds, moving faster than before. Thelnas recorded this with growing disbelief. The human's body was releasing chemical stimulants in response to injury. Adrenaline, the data files called it. Instead of shock and collapse, humans got stronger when hurt. The battle continued for 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous combat with no respite. Vreen forces attacked in waves, using their numerical advantage to try crushing the human position. But the humans held. When ammunition ran low, they stripped weapons from dead enemies. When their defensive position was compromised, they shifted to a new position and held that instead. Sergeant Minho directed his squad with calm efficiency even as blood ran down his face from a head wound. A human medic named Hyarin worked in the middle of the fighting. She ran from soldier to soldier, treating wounds while Vreen warriors charged past. Thelnas saw her inject something into an unconscious human's neck. The human woke up and immediately returned to fighting. Later, Thelnas learned that humans carried chemicals to force their bodies back into combat readiness, trading future health for immediate functionality. It was insane. It was effective. Union forces finally pushed forward with armored support, relieving the human position. When Thelnas reached Minho's squad, it expected to find broken soldiers, traumatized and desperate for evacuation. Instead, the humans were reloading weapons and discussing tactical adjustments for the next engagement. Out of 8 soldiers, 3 were wounded. 1 was dead. 4 were injured but still combat capable. The 8th was completely unharmed. Sergeant Minho, medical evacuation is available, Thelnas said, its voice translator struggling to keep steady. Minho looked up from wrapping a bandage around his leg. Blood soaked through the fabric. Evacuation? We're fine. You have sustained significant injuries. You need proper medical treatment. I can walk. I can shoot. That means I'm fine. Minho stood up, testing his weight on the injured leg. He winced but did not fall. We hold this position until relieved or dead. Captain's orders. But you could die from those wounds, Thelnas protested. Could die staying here too. Might as well make it useful. Minho picked up his rifle and checked the ammunition counter. You want to see something really crazy? Watch Hyarin work. She's been shot twice and hasn't stopped moving. Thelnas found the medic treating another soldier. Hyarin had indeed been shot, once in the shoulder and once in the side. She had bandaged herself and continued working. Her hands were steady as she stitched a deep cut on another human's arm. You need medical care, Thelnas said. Hyarin did not look up from her work. I'm giving medical care. I'll receive it later. Your injuries are my problem. His injuries are my job. She finished the stitching and moved to the next patient. Thelnas retreated to its observation post and reviewed the recorded data. The numbers made no sense. Humans had sustained injuries that would kill most species from shock alone, blood loss that should have caused unconsciousness, bone fractures that should have caused immobility, yet they continued fighting. Not through technology or medicine, but through sheer biological stubbornness. Their bodies simply refused to quit. The Vryn had broken off their assault and retreated deeper into the valley. For the first time in the 3-year campaign, they had been forced to abandon a position they held. 40 humans had done what entire Union battalions could not. That night, Thelnas updated its report. It struggled to find proper words. How could it explain that humans became more dangerous when wounded? That they fought through injuries that would incapacitate other species? That their medical personnel treated patients while under direct fire? The Union commanders would think Thelnas was exaggerating, or that its recording equipment malfunctioned. But the data was clear. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not have an off switch for combat. Something in their evolution had created persistence at a level that seemed biologically impossible. They were not the strongest or fastest or toughest species in the galaxy. But they were the only species that simply refused to stop, no matter what happened to them. Thelnas watched Sergeant Minho's squad settling in for the night. They cleaned weapons, ate rations, and joked with each other. The dead human had been wrapped respectfully and would be evacuated in the morning. The wounded sat with the unwounded. They showed no signs of trauma or fear. One human was singing quietly, a sad song about going home. These creatures terrified Thelnas in a way that Vryn warriors never had. The Vryn were violent and dangerous, but predictable. Humans were something else entirely. They were stubborn, death incarnate, wrapped in soft skin and polite manners, and they would keep coming until nothing remained to stop them. 3 days after the Valley battle, disaster struck the Union supply lines. A critical depot called Firebase Eternal was surrounded by Vryn forces. The firebase held ammunition, medical supplies, and food for 3 Union battalions. Losing it would cripple operations across the entire sector. Intelligence reported that a human detachment of 12 soldiers had been at the firebase during the attack. Standard procedure dictated waiting for the Vryn to overrun the position, then retaking it later. Nobody survived a Vryn siege. Captain Jiwan disagreed with standard procedure. She assembled a relief force and informed Union Command that her people were still alive and fighting. The Union officers thought she was in denial, hoping her soldiers survived when logic said otherwise. Thelnas accompanied the relief force, expecting to document the recovery of human bodies and write respectful words about noble sacrifice. The relief column fought through Vryn outer defenses and finally broke through to Firebase Eternal on the morning of the 4th day. Thelnas expected to find ruins, burned buildings, and scattered remains. Instead, the firebase was fully functional. Defensive walls had been reinforced. Automated guns tracked movement from elevated positions. Human soldiers patrolled the perimeter with alert efficiency. In the center of the compound, Vryn bodies were stacked in neat piles, at least 200 corpses. Lieutenant Soman met them at the gate. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and short black hair. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood, both human and Vryn. She saluted Captain Jiwan crisply. "Firebase Eternal secure, ma'am. We maintained position and conducted limited offensive operations against enemy staging areas." Thelna stared at her. "Limited offensive operations? You were surrounded. Limited offensive reser. Limited offensive reser. Limited offensive reser." Salmon turned to look at the alien observer. "Surrounded just means you can attack in any direction. We chose several directions. Inside the firebase, the situation became clearer and more disturbing. The human detachment had not hidden or waited for rescue. They had fortified the position using salvaged materials and Vryn corpses as makeshift barriers. They had raided enemy positions each night, stealing supplies and gathering intelligence. They had set traps in the surrounding area that killed dozens of Vryn warriors. And they had done all this with diminishing supplies and no sleep. Lieutenant Junho sat in the command center, studying tactical displays with red-rimmed eyes. He had been awake for 4 days straight, sustained by coffee and something humans called spite. When Thelnas asked him how he remained functional, Junho laughed. "You know what keeps me going? The thought of those Vryan bastards thinking they had us trapped. I wanted to see their faces when they realized we weren't trapped in here with them. They were trapped out there with us." Thelnas reviewed the casualty reports. 3 humans dead. 4 seriously wounded but still ambulatory. 5 humans fully combat capable despite exhaustion and minor injuries. They had killed over 300 Vryn warriors and destroyed 2 ammunition depots behind Vryn lines. The mathematics made no sense. 12 humans should not have survived 3 hours against 3,000 Vryn. Yet here they stood, joking and drinking coffee, as if they had merely endured a difficult training exercise. That afternoon, the Vryn launched one final assault to overrun the firebase before the relief force could fully establish itself. Thousands of insect warriors charged from all directions simultaneously. It was a suicide attack, sacrificing numbers to achieve the objective. Most species would have retreated inside the defensive walls and relied on automated weapons. The humans countercharged. Thelnas watched in absolute horror as Lieutenant Salmon led her soldiers out of the firebase and directly into the Vryn swarm. They fired as they advanced, each shot precise and lethal. When they reached melee range, humans pulled out knives and fought hand-to-hand with creatures twice their size. Salmon moved like a dancer, ducking under Vryn claws and driving her blade into joints and eye clusters. A human named Taeyang lost his rifle and picked up a Vryn mandible from a corpse, using it as a weapon against its former owners. But this was not simple violence. This was calculated brutality, designed to break enemy morale. Humans did not just kill Vryn warriors. They made examples. One human deliberately wounded a Vryn commander and let it crawl away, broadcasting its pain and fear through the hive-mind connection. Another human stacked Vryn corpses in specific patterns that apparently had psychological significance, though Thelnas did not understand the symbols. When the assault broke, the Vryn did not conduct an orderly withdrawal. They fled in panic. Thelnas had never seen Vryn panic before. Hive-mind species did not experience individual fear, but the humans had found a way to inject terror directly into the collective consciousness. They had weaponized psychology itself. Union forces captured a Vryn commander during the retreat. Thelnas observed the interrogation. The Vryn showed signs of severe psychological trauma. It kept repeating phrases through the translation device. Creatures that do not stop. Creatures that grow stronger when hurt. Creatures that laugh at death. The interrogator asked what the humans had done. The Vryn's answer chilled Thelnas to its crystalline core. They did not break when we surrounded them. They did not hide. They came into our tunnels and killed us in our own homes. They sang songs while fighting. They smiled when wounded. They are not natural. They are wrong. Lieutenant Salmon found Thelnas reviewing the interrogation footage that evening. She sat down nearby and drank from a canteen. "You look disturbed, observer," she said. "I am trying to understand your tactics. You deliberately caused psychological trauma to the enemy." "Yes. That seems cruel." Salmon's expression hardened. "You know what's cruel? Those Vryn wiped out an entire colony on Paxis 7, 80,000 civilians. Men, women, children. They did it because humans had refused to surrender a mining station. So yes, I made them afraid. Fear is a weapon like any other. If scaring a few Vryn commanders saves lives on the next battlefield, then I'll scare them. I'll give them nightmares. I'll make them dread the thought of fighting humans. But your own people, our volunteers, we chose this. We train for this. And we understand something that most species don't. Salmon leaned forward. Violence is a language. Sometimes, the only way to stop violence is to speak that language so fluently that your enemies lose the will to fight. We don't enjoy it, but we're very, very good at it. Thelnas spent that night compiling its report. The siege of Firebase Eternal had revealed something fundamental about human military doctrine. They did not fight to achieve objectives through minimum necessary force, which was standard Union practice. They fought to break enemy will, completely and permanently. They understood that killing every enemy soldier was impossible, but making enemies afraid to fight was entirely achievable. The humans prepared to move out the next morning. They had slept only a few hours, but appeared ready for more combat. Lieutenant Junho drank his coffee and studied maps of the next objective. Lieutenant Salmon cleaned her weapons and sang quietly to herself. The other soldiers joked and prepared equipment with casual efficiency. Thelnas realized that humans had turned warfare into something beyond tactical objectives and casualty ratios. They had made it personal. Each human fought not just for victory, but to ensure that enemies regretted ever challenging humanity. It was a level of commitment that transcended professional military service. These humans were not merely soldiers. They were something older and more primal. Predators from a death world who had learned to dress in uniforms and follow orders, but never forgot what they truly were. Captain Jiwan approached Thelnas before departure. "What will you tell Union Command about us?" Thelnas considered the question carefully. "I will tell them that you achieved impossible objectives through unconventional means. I will tell them that human casualties were acceptable and mission success was total. And what will you tell them about who we really are?" Thelnas met the captain's eyes. In them, it saw something ancient and patient. The eyes of a persistence hunter that would follow prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. "I will tell them the truth. That humans are the most terrifying species I have ever encountered." Jiwan smiled. "Good. That reputation will save lives. Ours and theirs." Union Command had studied the human performance and reached a conclusion. If 40 humans could achieve what they had achieved with minimal support, perhaps a coordinated offensive using human tactics could break the Vrin completely. Captain Jiwan proposed something that made the Union generals extremely uncomfortable. She wanted to conduct a night assault on the primary Vrin staging grounds. Most species had poor night vision and considered darkness dangerous. Battles were fought during daylight, when soldiers could see threats and coordinate effectively. Fighting at night was considered foolish at best and suicidal at worst. Jiwan explained that humans fought better at night. Their eyes adapted to low light better than most species. They could use darkness as a weapon rather than a hindrance. More importantly, night combat created psychological advantages. Fear of the dark was nearly universal among sentient species. Humans could weaponize that fear. Thelnas attended the planning session and listened to Union generals argue against the plan. It was too risky. The casualties would be unacceptable. Standard doctrine prohibited night offensives. Captain Jiwan listened patiently, then showed them the casualty projections. A conventional daylight assault would cost thousands of Union soldiers and take weeks. Her night assault would cost perhaps 50 humans and be completed in hours. The generals reluctantly approved the operation. Thelnas was embedded with an assault team led by Corporal Kyung. He was a tall man with calm demeanor and quiet voice. His squad consisted of 6 soldiers, all veterans of the previous engagements. They prepared equipment as darkness fell across the landscape. Thelnas noticed they carried unusual items, strange devices that made sounds, containers of foul-smelling liquids, and recording equipment that seemed unnecessary for combat. "What are those for?" Thelnas asked. Kyung smiled. "Psychological warfare. We're not just here to kill Vrin. We're here to terrify them." The assault began 3 hours after midnight. Humans moved through darkness like they were born to it. silent, and efficient. Thelnas struggled to keep up, despite its enhanced vision equipment. The humans seemed to navigate by instinct, avoiding obstacles and finding paths through terrain that should have been impassable in darkness. They reached the Vrine perimeter undetected. Kyung made hand signals, and his squad dispersed into the shadows. Then, the sounds began. Humans had brought recording equipment loaded with what they called war music. The sounds were harsh and rhythmic, designed to create distress in species that communicated through acoustic signals. The Vryn hive mind used sound patterns to coordinate. The human music disrupted those patterns, creating confusion and panic. Vryn warriors poured from their tunnels, disoriented and frightened. The humans were waiting. They attacked from darkness, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Each engagement lasted seconds. Humans would strike, kill, and vanish before the Vryn could organize a response. It was not honorable combat. It was predation. Thelnas watched a human combat engineer named Jisoo work during a brief pause in fighting. She was examining salvaged Vryn equipment and broken human weapons. Within minutes, she had created an improvised explosive device using components from both. She placed it near a Vryn tunnel entrance, set a timer, and moved to the next position. The explosion collapsed the tunnel and trapped hundreds of Vryn warriors underground. "How did you know how to do that?" Thelnas asked. Jisoo shrugged. "Basic engineering principles. Plus, we're good at improvising. It's a human thing." As the night progressed, Thelnas began to understand the true scope of human tactical thinking. They did not simply react to battlefield conditions. They created battlefield conditions. Every action was designed to produce multiple effects. Killing enemies was secondary to breaking their will to fight. The war music continued broadcasting, drowning out Vryn coordination signals. Fires burned at strategic locations, destroying supplies but also creating visual chaos. Humans left false trails and ambush markers, forcing Vryn to waste resources investigating threats that did not exist. Corporal Kyung was wounded during an engagement with a Vryn heavy warrior. The creature's claw tore across his chest, cutting through body armor and into flesh. Blood soaked his uniform. He stumbled backward, and Thelnas thought he would fall. Instead, Kyung raised his rifle and emptied the magazine into the Vryn's head. The creature collapsed. Kyung reloaded his weapon and continued advancing. "You need immediate medical attention," Thelnas said, moving to help him. Later, Kyung's voice was tight with pain but steady. "Mission first." He continued fighting for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of continuous combat with a wound that should have caused shock and unconsciousness. He killed at least a dozen more Vryn warriors before finally accepting medical aid from a squad medic. The medic performed field surgery using improvised tools while sitting behind a barricade with weapons fire passing overhead. She used thread from a parachute cord as suture material and sealed the wound with bonding paste designed for equipment repair. It was horrifying. It worked. The Vryn counterattack came at dawn. Thousands of warriors charged the human positions in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the invaders through sheer numbers. It should have worked. Humans were exhausted from fighting all night. They were low on ammunition and supplies. They were outnumbered 50 to 1. They should have been crushed. But humans at dawn, tired and wounded and desperate, were somehow more dangerous than humans at night. Fresh and prepared. Thelnas could not explain it. Perhaps it was adrenaline. Perhaps it was training. Perhaps it was something deeper, some evolutionary adaptation that made humans most lethal when they should have been most vulnerable. Kyung's squad formed a defensive line and held it. They fired with precision that seemed impossible given their exhaustion. When ammunition ran low, they switched to captured Vryn weapons. When those ran out, they fought hand-to-hand with knives and improvised clubs. A human named Minsu used a broken rifle barrel as a spear, driving it through Vryn armor, with strength born from desperation. The Vryn broke first. Despite overwhelming numbers, despite fighting on their home ground, Despite every tactical advantage, they retreated in disorder. The hive mind had experienced too much fear, too much pain, too much confusion. The collective consciousness made a decision that individual Vreen warriors could not make. It chose survival over victory. Union forces advanced behind the human assault teams and secured the staging grounds. The victory was total. Vreen command structure was shattered. Their supplies were destroyed. Their morale was broken, and it had cost exactly 37 human casualties, 21 wounded and 16 dead. Thelnas found Corporal Kyung receiving proper medical treatment in a field hospital. Doctors were amazed he had survived, much less continued fighting. His wound should have been fatal, without immediate surgery. The improvised field treatment should not have been sufficient. But Kyung sat up in bed, arguing with doctors about when he could return to duty. "You nearly died," one doctor said. "Nearly doesn't count," Kyung replied. "I'm still here. When can I get back to my squad?" Thelnas approached his bed. "Why did you continue fighting when you were wounded?" Kyung considered the question. "My squad needed me. Simple as that. But you could have died. Could have. Didn't. And because I kept fighting, my squad survived. That's what matters. Do you not value your own life? Of course I do. That's why I fight so hard to protect it. But I value my squad's lives too. Sometimes, you push through pain because stopping means people you care about die. It's not complicated. But it was complicated to Thelnas. Most species had biological limits that forced them to stop when injured. Shock, pain, blood loss. All these things caused involuntary shutdown of combat capability. Humans had those limits too, but they could choose to ignore them. They could decide that their mission was more important than their body's survival instincts. It was biologically abnormal and tactically devastating. That night, Thelnas compiled another report. The human ability to adapt was their greatest weapon. They turned any environment into an advantage. Darkness became cover. Exhaustion became motivation. Wounds became fuel for rage. They innovated constantly, creating new weapons and tactics in real time as battlefield conditions changed. But more than that, humans had made warfare personal in a way that other species had not. Each human fought, not just for victory, but for the survival of their companions. They formed emotional bonds that transcended military hierarchy. They would die for each other, and more frighteningly, they would keep fighting through conditions that should cause death, sustained only by the knowledge that their survival meant their friends would survive too. Thelnas watched human soldiers celebrating their victory with quiet satisfaction. They did not boast or gloat. They simply existed in that moment, grateful to be alive and proud of what they had accomplished. Tomorrow they would fight again. Next week, they would face new enemies. But tonight, they had won. And that was enough. These creatures from Earth had revealed something fundamental about themselves. They were not the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy. They were not the most technologically advanced or the most numerous, but they were the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and the most unwilling to accept defeat. And that made them the most dangerous species Thelnas had ever encountered. 3 months after the initial human deployment, Thelnas sat in a quiet office, preparing its final report to Galactic Union Command. The walls displayed data collected from dozens of engagements, hundreds of hours of combat footage, and interviews with both human soldiers and their enemies. The numbers told a story that should have been impossible. Humans had deployed with an initial force of 200 soldiers. They had suffered 35% casualties, 70 dead, and another 70 wounded. But they had achieved 300% of their mission objectives, accomplishing tasks that Union planners had considered optional stretch goals. More significantly, the Vreen had been broken as a military threat. Their forces had retreated from 7 contested systems. Their command structure had fragmented. And most surprisingly, Vreen prisoners exhibited something that Thelnas had never seen in a hive mind species before. They showed individual fear, psychological trauma that persisted even when separated from the collective consciousness. Thelnas had interviewed dozens of surviving Vreen warriors. Their testimonies were remarkably consistent. They called humans the ones who don't die. They described human soldiers continuing to fight with wounds that should have been immediately fatal. They spoke of humans appearing from darkness like demons, attacking with precision and vanishing before counterattacks could be organized. Most disturbingly, they described humans laughing during combat, singing songs while killing, showing joy in battle when they should have been terrified. One Vryn commander had survived the night assault on the staging grounds. During interrogation, it had said something that Thelnas recorded verbatim for the report. "We thought we understood warfare. We thought numbers and strength determined victory. Then humans came. They fight like they are already dead. No fear of death means they cannot be threatened. They will trade their lives for tactical advantage without hesitation. But they do not die easily. They are wounded and continue. They are exhausted and continue. They are surrounded and continue. They do not stop. How do you fight enemies who refuse to stop?" Thelnas had requested a final meeting with Captain Jiwan before submitting the report. They met in the Human Command Center, which was being packed up for deployment to a new contract. Jiwan poured coffee for both of them, though Thelnas could not drink the bitter liquid. "You wanted to talk before I leave?" Jiwan asked, settling into a chair. "I need to understand something. Your military philosophy. I have observed human forces for 3 months, and I still cannot fully comprehend how you fight." Jiwan smiled. "Most species fight until it's no longer logical to continue. They calculate odds, assess casualties, determine if victory is achievable. When the calculation says defeat is certain, they surrender or retreat. That's rational behavior. And humans do not behave rationally. We behave differently. Humans fight until it's no longer possible to continue. Not until it's illogical. Until it's actually impossible." Jiwan sipped her coffee. "We evolved as persistence hunters on a death world. Our ancestors chased prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't give up when the prey was faster or stronger. We gave up when we physically could not take another step. That's in our DNA still. But the casualties are people I knew, people I cared about. Every death hurts." Jiwan's expression became somber. "We don't fight recklessly because we don't value life. We fight desperately because we value it completely. We know that stopping, surrendering, retreating, those things feel safe, but often lead to more death later. Sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to die for it. And if you must die, you make that death count for something." Thelnas processed this. "Your wounded soldiers from early battles. Many have returned to duty. This should not be medically possible. Humans heal stubbornly too. It's not magic. It's biology and willpower. And our minds refuse to accept permanent disability if any alternative exists." Jiwan pulled up a medical file on her datapad. "Sergeant Minho. Wounded in the first engagement. Doctors said he would need 6 months recovery. He was back in 4 weeks. Lieutenant Junho. Concussion and fractured ribs during the siege. Doctors recommended 3 months rest. He took 2 weeks. We don't heal faster than other species. We just refuse to stay broken. I spoke with Lieutenant Junho yesterday. He told me that healing is just another battle. It is. Pain is an enemy. Injury is an enemy. You fight those enemies the same way you fight any enemy. You refuse to surrender. You take ground inch by inch. You celebrate small victories, and eventually, you win." Jiwan finished her coffee. "What will you tell Union Command about us?" Bye. Thelnas had prepared its conclusion carefully. "I will tell them that human military effectiveness does not come primarily from superior technology or tactics, though both are adequate. It comes from biology and psychology that make humans nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. I will tell them that humans possess biological responses to stress and injury that increase combat effectiveness rather than decreasing it. I will tell them that human emotional bonding creates unit cohesion stronger than any I have observed in other species. And I will tell them my final recommendation, which is, do not make enemies of humans. If war with humans becomes necessary, surrender immediately. The cost of fighting humans to actual defeat is unacceptable. Jiwan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think we're that dangerous? I think you are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because you are cruel or evil, but because you simply do not stop. Every species has limits. Humans have limits too, but they refuse to acknowledge them until physically forced to. That makes you unpredictable and nearly unstoppable. Over the following weeks, Thelnos completed the formal report and submitted it to Union Command. The response was skeptical at first. Surely the observer was exaggerating human capabilities. Surely no species could be that effective. But the combat data was irrefutable. The testimony from Vreen prisoners was consistent, and most convincingly, other species who had observed human combat provided similar reports. The report created unexpected consequences. Multiple species requested human training programs. They wanted to learn human tactics, human weapons handling, human psychological warfare techniques. Captain Jiwan's company found themselves in demand not just as mercenaries, but as teachers. Thelnos attended one such training session before departing for its next assignment. Human instructors were teaching alien soldiers basic combat techniques. Daehyun, the soldier Thelnos had met during the first night on Kovan Prime, was demonstrating close-quarters combat to a group of Krenth warriors who were twice his size. Pain is just weakness leaving the body, Daehyun said, demonstrating a strike technique. And we all have a lot of weakness to lose. Your body will tell you to stop, that you're tired, that you're hurt, that you can't continue. Those feelings are real, but they're not always true. Sometimes you can continue. Sometimes you must continue. That's when you learn what you're really capable of. A Krenth warrior raised one of his forearms. But what if the pain is too great? Then you push through it anyway. Or you don't. And you fail. Those are the options. Daehyun smiled. But his eyes were serious. Nobody said it would be easy. Nobody said it wouldn't hurt. But if you want to win, if you want to survive, if you want to protect what matters to you, then you find a way to keep moving. That's the human way. That's what we're teaching you. Thelnos watched the training session and realized something profound. Humans were not just sharing combat techniques. They were sharing their philosophy of life. The refusal to quit, the determination to continue despite pain and fear, the willingness to sacrifice for others. These were not just military values. These were human values, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a hostile world where giving up meant death. Before leaving, Thelnos found Captain Jiwan one final time. The captain was reviewing deployment orders for the company's next contract. I wanted to thank you, Thelnos said. You allowed me to observe your people honestly. You did not hide your methods or your nature. Why would we hide? Jiwan asked. We are what we are. Soft-skinned persistence hunters from a death world who learned to build spaceships but never forgot how to fight. The galaxy should know that about us. It prevents misunderstandings. Will you continue taking contracts? For now. Eventually, humanity will need to decide our place in the galaxy. We've been isolated for 3 centuries. That was necessary after we nearly destroyed ourselves in the war, but we're healed now. We're ready to engage with the wider universe, and we'll do it our way, with stubbornness and determination, and refusal to quit. The galaxy is not prepared for humanity. The galaxy will adapt. Everything adapts or dies. That's universal law. Jiwan smiled. Besides, we're not monsters. We're just humans. We laugh and cry and love and fear like everyone else. We just happen to be really, really good at fighting when we need to be. Thelnos departed Kovan Prime that evening. Its transport lifted off as human soldiers conducted evening training exercises below. They ran through obstacle courses, practiced weapons drills, and sang their war songs into the gathering darkness. They looked small and fragile against the massive landscape. But Thelnos knew the truth now. These soft-skinned creatures were the most terrifying predators in the galaxy, not despite their appearance but because of it. They looked harmless until you fought them. They seemed friendly until you threatened what they protected. They appeared weak until you wounded them and discovered that injury only made them more dangerous. They were persistence hunters who had learned to navigate the stars, but they never forgot what they were. And what they were was death itself. Patient and smiling and absolutely inevitable for anyone foolish enough to make enemies of humanity. Thelnos transmitted its final message to Union Command. The message was simple and clear. Recommendation accepted. New policy implemented. Do not engage human forces in warfare unless absolutely necessary. If engagement is unavoidable, prepare for acceptable casualties in excess of 90% before achieving tactical objectives. Human mercenary contracts approved for continued use. Request additional observers be trained in human cultural and psychological assessment. The age of human isolation had ended. The galaxy would now learn what Earth had always known: that humanity was not the strongest or fastest or smartest species, but they were the species that refused to lose. And in the end, that was more dangerous than any weapon ever invented.